Welcome back. So this is the second part of a three-part video series that I'm doing on getting started homeschooling. So my name is Barb Bideman, and the first part of the video series was pretty much about why to get started homeschooling and setting some goals, and I ended with talking about curriculum. And I decided that I'll probably talk a little bit more about curriculum after talking about styles of homeschooling, because those two really do go together, and it's kind of hard to say which comes first. For some people, I think they find curriculum that they like, and that sort of dictates the style of homeschooling that they choose. And for other people, I think they look at the different styles of homeschooling and then decide that they want to follow a particular style, and that sort of dictates the curriculum that they're going to use. So we're going to look at the styles of homeschooling, and then we'll go back and talk a little bit about curriculum, and I'll show you some of the things that I used in homeschooling my sons. My sons, as I mentioned before, have both graduated. The older son is now a PhD student at the University of Illinois in computer science theory. He graduated from Carnegie Mellon University in 2018 in computer science. And my younger son is now a sophomore at Robert Morris University, majoring in mechanical engineering. So anyway, and I also didn't mention in the previous video, my younger son is dyslexic, and so that has definitely played into our decisions about what type of materials to use with him and kind of what our style was to some degree too. So I'll mention that a little bit as we go along. So once again, I'm Barb Bideman. I am a homeschool mom who has graduated both her kids, and so I'm sort of finished. I still help with our support group that I started years ago. I still do homeschool evaluations. I live in the state of Pennsylvania, so the third video in this series will actually be about the Pennsylvania homeschool law. And so if you're not in Pennsylvania, I don't know if you'd be interested in that part. So this second part will kind of wrap up the getting started homeschooling in general, and then the third part will focus on Pennsylvania more. So thanks again for joining me, and we'll just pick up kind of where we left off. So we were just ready to talk about homeschooling styles. And I do have the information up here, but it's probably going to be a little more difficult to read. It's a little bit smaller. So I will be just kind of talking about the things that are on the slide. So the first approach is the traditional approach. And the traditional approach is pretty much doing school at home. So there are lots of curriculum companies out there who sell curriculum to homeschoolers and also sell curriculum to schools. And you can choose to get a package that would be pretty much what your kids would use if they were in a school setting. I'm familiar in particular with some of the Christian curriculum that's available like that. So I would think of Bob Jones and Abeka as two of the major curriculum distributors that would provide curriculum for people who are more interested in what we would call the traditional approach. So the traditional approach, you're going to have teachers' manuals, probably tests, probably resources for record keeping, things like that. And some people choose to do this because they're thinking about not necessarily homeschooling for the long term, maybe homeschooling for a year and then sending the child back to school. So they kind of want to do the same thing that the child was doing in school, so they will be able to kind of easily get right back into where they belong within the classes that are there. So that's what the traditional approach is. Then there's also the classical approach. The classical approach is pretty popular in our area. I know lots of people who are classical. We were not classical. So you may have heard of classical conversations, and in our area we have a couple like tutorial study centers that are also classical, that are just local. There's also a university model school that is classical as well, and in Pennsylvania, University Model School is homeschooling. And so anyway, classical, I'm going to read a little bit of this just to make sure I get it right, is derived from successful courses of study throughout history and recently revived through the writings of Dorothy Sayers. In the 1930s and 40s in Europe, Dorothy Sayers warned that schools were teaching children everything except how to think, and they could therefore be easily swayed by any tyrant who came along. She recommended reinstating the classical form of education used in the Middle Ages to give children the tools to learn. The basis for classical education is the trivium, and the trivium is divided into 3 different stages. So there's the grammar, the logic, and the rhetoric stage. So grammar would be more elementary, logic would be like middle school, and rhetoric would be high school. So if you're interested in classical education, then you might be interested in purchasing materials from Veritas Press, for instance, because they focus on classical education. There are also lots of online classes that are available for people who are following a classical education model. There are lots of resources out there as far as books and things on the internet. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, then I encourage you to do a little more research and find out what's available in your area and just kind of what the classical model is all about. And then the next approach is another one that's pretty popular. It's the Living Books and Life Experiences approach. And some people refer to that as Charlotte Mason homeschooling. So Charlotte Mason believes in, well, believed, she was an educator. So she believed in treating children not as containers to be filled with information, but as persons. And so one of the foundations of Charlotte Mason's philosophy is the understanding of the need for real-life experiences and living books. And I mentioned in the previous video, I have a library science background, so Charlotte Mason definitely appealed to me. I like the idea of using living books, and by living books, she means books that were written by people who are experts on a topic and who are really enthusiastic about the topic that they're writing on. And that if you use those types of books as opposed to regular textbooks, that they will help to satisfy the curiosity of your children and also encourage that curiosity at the same time, and that they'll be more interesting as far as learning about the particular topic that you're studying. And she also talks about twaddle, and twaddle would be worthless or inferior teaching material. So I have to say that we have some books on our shelves that I'm sure would fall into the twaddle category. But when you do have a child who's dyslexic, if they like to read something, even if it seems kind of silly on the twaddle side of things, you might still have that available to them, because reading is difficult, and if they're going to work on it themselves, then it's good to provide some materials for that. So it's up to you how you feel about twaddle. And then there's the unit study approach. So I spoke about the unit study approach at our state homeschool convention this past year, and I am definitely kind of passionate about that. It's not something that we followed necessarily the way some people talk about it on the internet, but it is definitely something that I saw great value in, because you could integrate a number of subjects together when you're studying something. And to me, that seems much more like a real life experience as well. So unit study approach, you integrate several subjects around a common theme usually. And so the example here is birds. And some of the things that are listed here would be to look up Bible verses on birds, study Audubon's paintings, visit a bird banding station, paint a picture of a favorite bird, build a birdhouse appropriate for the local birds in your area, write a report about a particular bird. So there are lots of different things that you can do related to one particular topic that fall into many different subject areas. So that can be kind of a fun way to homeschool because it's something that's a little bit different. And if there's something, like if your child is really interested in birds, this could be a great way to get in all those different subjects and make it really fun and exciting for your child to do. And unit study, a lot of times I think people are overwhelmed because they think it's going to be so much work to get all these materials together and write lesson plans. And you don't really have to go crazy with, getting every single resource that you can find related to this topic. You can gather a few resources and just get started and kind of see where things go. Maybe your unit study is going to last a week. Maybe your unit study is going to last a month. Maybe you're going to do it 2 days a week or 1 day a week or just in the mornings or whatever. It doesn't have to be a certain way. And I think that's why people have shied away from unit studies, because a lot of people will say, if you're using unit studies, you have to do it this way. And I just really don't think that's true. It's the way it is with homeschooling. Like I said before, everybody is different. And so the way that you teach, even within one of these particular approaches, is probably going to be a little bit different than somebody else using the same approach. So again, embrace the freedom and enjoy that. I also wanted to mention, right here, there's a game called Wingspan, which won the Spiel des Jahres this year. And that's kind of a fun thing, too, to be able to incorporate some of the really good games that are out there. We actually borrowed that game from our library and really enjoyed it. And I think it would be a super game for anybody who's studying birds. The pictures are wonderful, the information on the cards is great, and it's a really fun game to play, and it really makes sense. A lot of the rules in the game fit well with the theme of birds, and these are all North American birds, by the way. So anyway, yeah, it's great to be able to incorporate lots of different ways of studying a particular topic. And then there's unschooling. So unschooling is something that I was kind of fascinated with when we first started homeschooling. And I think part of the reason I was fascinated with that is because it was so different than public school. And my background was teaching elementary school. So unschooling is really something that came about in the 70s. A man named John Holt is kind of accredited with being the father or the grandfather of unschooling. So unschooling originally referred to John Holt's fairly child-centered methods, but has come to refer simply to a less structured approach that allows children to pursue their own interests with parental support and guidance. And so what we're saying is that a lot of what unschooling is about is following your child's interest. And different people do that in different ways. So some people will just wake up in the morning and say, it's a new day, what do we do today? They'll go on field trips, they'll do life, they'll go to the grocery store, they'll go to the library, and learn as they go. Other people might call their style, which falls within this approach, as they might call it relaxed homeschooling. So in that case, they're following their child's interests as well, but there might be a little bit more structure, a little more input from the parent as far as what they do, and maybe that includes using a little bit of curriculum. So maybe they're using a math curriculum or something like that, along with just basically following their child's interests. There's also delight-directed learning or homeschooling, and in that case, it kind of overlaps sometimes with the whole unit study, but maybe a more unstructured unit study where you're following your child's interests and you're providing lots of resources and kind of pursuing things as they come along. So you're studying one thing and you realize that there's something else related to that you're really interested in, so you kind of veer off and start studying that, and one thing sort of leads to another, and you're basically following the things that are interesting and bring delight. So anyway, unschooling, another approach. Then there's the identity-directed approach. And that's the approach that I would say we followed with our younger son as he got older. Because when you're dyslexic, obviously you're somebody who's going to struggle with things related to language arts. And so we had to spend extra time on those subjects when he was younger. But by the time he got to the end of middle school and started high school, it didn't make sense to keep focusing on the things that were difficult for him. Obviously, you need to meet or come to a certain level of achievement within those areas, but you don't need to just keep focusing on those all the way through. What's really important, I think, is to focus on your child's strengths as they get older. Because you really want your child to do something after high school that is a strength and not a weakness. It doesn't make sense to go into a career that you're not good at, that is really too hard for you to be able to do well. So it makes sense to, as you go through middle school and as you get into high school, to really try to determine the direction that you'd like to go after high school and determine what your interests are, what your strengths are, and head in that direction. And so that's really what the identity-directed approach is. It has to do with discovering what your child is good at, what their talents and gifts are, and developing those. So we found that with our younger son, he was very strong in math and science, which was wonderful. And so that's why I mentioned in the previous video, I believe, that he was able to get an associate's degree in math and science when he graduated from homeschool high school, because he did dual enrollment courses while he was in high school. But those high school courses that he did were mainly math and science type courses, which was a great foundation for mechanical engineering that he's majoring in now. And then we have the eclectic approach. So I would say that we were eclectic, and you might have figured that out by now. Eclectic involves kind of blending different approaches together. So you might decide to use some traditional curriculum, textbooks, but you might build unit studies around maybe historical periods or something like that, and incorporate maybe language arts and music and art, things like that. Then you might choose to use a computer program to teach something else. So if you're eclectic, you can really kind of pick and choose the different things that work best for each child in your family. So these all came from a website called Homeschool Marketplace. It used to be the Elijah Company, but they sort of retired from selling curriculum, but they still have this information online. So these are some of the things that we used when we were homeschooling. So we have Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. That was what we used to teach reading. Now, that worked better with my older son than it did with my younger son. So it's a good curriculum even if your child does struggle with reading. It's actually designed to be a curriculum for kids that have difficulty learning to read and kids that learn to read just like everyone else. So that's what we used. We also used Singapore Math. So that would be this right here. And it worked really well for my kids. I really liked Singapore Math. I particularly liked the word problems that were in Singapore Math. But then we also use Mequon Math. So we used that in grades 1, 2, and 3. We use both Singapore and Mequon. Mequon comes in different colored books. So there's orange and red and blue and green and yellow and purple. And so we would do 2 books from Mequon a year. And I really like Mequon because they had a lot of problems that I thought were really helpful for preparing your child for algebra. So they didn't really have word problems per se, but I thought that was a helpful element. So I combined the Singapore and the Miquan in the younger grades, and then when they got to fourth grade, both my kids finished their Singapore, but my kids were pretty strong in math, so I wouldn't expect that of everyone. So, and then we used these books, which are called Pathway Readers. So they're readers that are actually put out by the Amish. And I think I mentioned this before, that I actually wrote to the publisher Pathway and asked them to send me their sheet of prices for their materials, and then ordered them that way because they didn't have a website or anything like that. But you can also order them through Rainbow Resource, which was the company that we bought most of our curriculum from, just because they had so much all in one place. It was easier to do it that way. So anyway, we enjoyed the Pathway Readers. I like the idea that they followed the same family all the way through. I found when I was teaching reading in public school, we were using these books that were supposed to expose kids to lots of different types of literature, which is great, but when you're learning to read, that's hard. It's a lot easier if you're following the same people, same characters, same kinds of situations, and you have some framework to put the next story in, rather than jumping from one thing to another, from one continent to another, with different kinds of stories and folk tales and just, information, and it was just difficult. So I did like these, and I felt like they were a little more friendly for the beginning reader. So I'll share with you a few other things that we really enjoyed as far as our homeschooling and curriculum. So I really, really liked these books, which are they probably look different now than they did when I bought them, but this is Editor-in-Chief, and these books are supposed to be for grades 3 and 4. So we'll start with Editor-in-Chief. Editor-in-Chief is teaching kids some of their grammar skills and proofreading in particular. So there'll be a story that they read, a little paragraph here of some sort, and then in this book, this is the beginner one, it has questions that they answer about the grammar and the spelling and things like that in that particular paragraph. And later, so this series goes all the way up through high school. So in later books, they find errors, and if they had trouble finding errors, there's kind of this great guide, a grammar guide in the back of the book that we used so that I could tell them the particular section in the back of the book to look at and read the rules, and then they would know that that's the type of error they missed, and then they'd go back and try to find it. So I particularly like this because it worked well with both of our kids, and it wasn't easy to find curriculum that worked well for both of them. So this is the Critical Thinking Company that puts this out. I just really like their materials in general. And then this one is called Reading Detective, and I really liked Reading Detective for helping the kids learn how to understand what they're reading, to work on comprehension. So Reading Detective Beginning kind of works through cause and effect and drawing conclusions and things like that. And so it's a good place to start, maybe in 3rd grade or so, maybe a little before that, maybe a little after that, depending on the child, but to help them kind of get used to reading and analyzing a little bit of what they've read. I think it's particularly good for helping to prepare them if they need to take any kind of standardized test as well. But I like the selections that they choose. Some are from actual works of literature, and some of them are written by, I think it's Cheryl Block, who is one of the authors of the book. There might be some written by each one. But anyway, really like this book as well. And again, there are others that are in the same series there. So just a few other things that we've used that I thought I'd bring up. So we used IEW Institute for Excellence in Writing, Andrew Pudewa. My kids really like that. My older son kind of outgrew that probably around age 11 or so. My younger son worked with IEW all the way through high school, several different series that they had. So, and they have lots more materials now than they did when I started homeschooling. So I wanted to bring up this book. This is a literature guide for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I did not love literature guides. I really felt like sometimes if you spend too much time dissecting a book, it just kind of ruins it. It's not fun anymore. It's not interesting. It's work. And so just be careful in using things like this. This is something that I actually used when I taught school. I didn't really use this too much, or this kind of thing too much with my kids. Although sometimes there are activities in books like this that can be a lot of fun. But I'd be careful about spending lots and lots of time on every new vocabulary word that's in the book and things like that. Just because, like I said, sometimes that can make it so that it's not much fun anymore. Some other things. So, books from Kingfisher I really liked. This is Wonders of the World, and in my talk that I did about doing unit studies, I talked about pairing books like this with like a game like Seven Wonders. If you've ever seen Seven Wonders, it's a really good game, and if you read a book like this and then played Seven Wonders, you'd have a much better background for understanding the different things that are in Seven Wonders, the different elements of the game. So, and I brought this one because I really like Jean Fritz books. So anything that you can find by Jean Fritz, I think is worth taking the time to read. She has a lot of history books. So this would be one of them. This is Around the World in 100 Years. And this one is We're Writing the Constitution. These were fun. Our kids enjoyed these books. And then, of course, I just brought this one in as an example. This is Asia. Of Usborne. Usborne has lots of really great books that you could use for homeschooling as well. As you can see, we were eclectic, so we used lots of different books. And this is just another Usborne book. This is about the Second World War. We use books like this. This is the Amazing Earth Model book. And it was fun because you could make these different models of the Earth just out of paper. And there were things like, you know, some coloring that you did. My kids weren't thrilled about coloring. But a lot of times they had kind of moving parts and just interesting things about them. Some people really love to do lap books. My kids did not like lap books. But they did enjoy making these models. And this was one of my favorites that we had gotten from the library. And then we actually purchased it ourselves. I probably found it on discount at the local Scholastic sale or something like that. But it's Fun with Nature, Take-Along Guide, and this one has lots of really cool things that you can do to learn about nature. I remember we did one of the activities in here to learn a little bit more about squirrels. You were supposed to tie a rope between like two trees or something. We did it between our lamppost and a tree outside, and hang some peanuts from it and see how the squirrel could walk across the rope and get the peanuts. And that was fascinating. We had such a fun time. So I like books like this that have activities that we can do, and we can actually learn some things, and the book has some information to guide you along. And again, some of my favorites here. A lot of them I'm bringing up just because I really like the series or the author or something like that. So this is Circumference and the Dragon of Pi. So there are a number of circumference books in the series, fun math books. If you're looking for something different to do, maybe on a Friday or whatever, read a circumference book. It's great. And then also, you could get Greg Tang books on math out of the library. This one is Masterpieces, and it has actual artwork, and then it'll have some kind of math concept to go along with that. So this is a fun way to kind of incorporate math and art together. Again, you know, if you're looking for something a little bit different to do, you're getting a little tired of what you're doing, this is a nice way to take a break. This is Neil S. Godfrey's Ultimate Kids Money book, and this one was just, my older son in particular was very interested in certain topics. When he was very young, he was interested in time, and so we did a unit study on time, made different kinds of clocks, like a water clock and a sundial and things like that, and actually went to a watch and clock museum that we didn't even know existed here in Pennsylvania. But then later on, he was interested in money. So this is a book that just tells you all about money and different kinds of money and history. And so this was a fun book for him. And again, this is one that we had gotten from the library, and he enjoyed it so much we thought we might as well purchase the book ourselves. Another one that was fun, 25 Mini Math Mysteries. So this is something where we would do a math mystery like once a week. And again, it was just something that was fun and challenging, and I wanted my kids to enjoy math, and I don't know, they may have enjoyed math even if we didn't do these things, but I would like to think that this contributed to their enjoyment. So these math mysteries were kind of challenging and kind of got you thinking outside the box. So that was a good book for my kids, and I'm sure there are lots of other books that are similar to this. Oh, and I have to bring up these two books. So this is the I Hate Mathematics book and Math for Smarty Pants. And these are both written by Marilyn Burns. And so they also have very interesting math puzzles that you can do. And you can do them with things like toothpicks, and they're just fun hands-on activities to do with math. And Marilyn Burns has written other books as well, so I would encourage you to look into Marilyn Burns. And then I have one more math here, and this is Family Math, and this is an old book. I got this one at some used curriculum sale when my kids were little. It's been around a long time, but I still see it on lists all the time as something that people recommend. So again, this is another one that has lots of fun activities that you can do that are math related. And I know my older son had a math club when he was in high school that was for like 2nd through 5th graders, and I think they met maybe twice a month at our house, and he used this book for a lot of the activities that they did. And they really enjoyed it, and he really enjoyed it, so it was a good thing. Two more things that I wanted to mention, well, maybe 3, real quick. So these are something that I used all the time. These are business cards. So they're business cards. We use the back of them because you could make cards for games. You could write words on them and have your kids cut them in half into syllables. You could do all kinds of things. We just had so many things that we did with business cards. So if you have old business cards, hang on to them. There's probably some fun things that you could think of to do with them. And then we also used manipulatives. Those are things that they could pick up and use as part of learning. So this is a 100 block, this is a 10 stick here, but we used these kinds of things for math so that they had something that they could tangibly touch and look at and move around as they were learning about different math concepts. We also had things like these fraction wheels. So again, something that they can pick up and use and see and feel and understand the concept better because they have something in front of them that demonstrates it. And then when they were young, we used some of these pattern blocks. So pattern blocks look like this. We'll show you. So there's like this, and Here's some more examples of pattern blocks. And they were fun because we had some books, I think they were particularly from ETA Cuisinier, where there were things that you could do with them for older kids, maybe like my son that was 4 years older than his younger brother, so he was maybe in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and then his little brother could do things like this. This is just a stack of different cards, and you use the pattern blocks to make whatever the shape is on the card. So I like things like that I could use with both my kids in different ways too, because it seemed like that was a better value as well. And then we also used the Cuisinier rods, which you can kind of see those in there. They go well with Miquon, with the Miquon map. They have different ways that you can use Cuisinier rods. So we used Cuisinier rods. We had some fun games that we like to play. This is one of my favorites, the 24 games. So this is something that I used when I taught elementary school and something that we've used at home. Something you can play as a family. It's lots of fun. So you could check out the 24 game if you're looking for a fun game. And then I also wanted to mention, so this game is called Reef, and it is from the library. So I'm going to flip it to the back so you can see a little bit better. So when we played this game with our 19-year-old son, because we just got it out of the library, he was saying, you know, it's a little bit like chess, because you have to think ahead as to what your next move is going to be, and you actually have to think a couple steps ahead. So I really think games can be great for developing critical thinking skills and being able to problem solve and things like that. So don't ignore the value of games when you're homeschooling. And I didn't talk about it, but I don't know if I'd list it as another approach, but there is also kind of a game schooling movement going on now too. A lot of people are interested or doing game schooling, which is incorporating lots of games into your homeschooling just to make it more interesting and fun. And I think part of the reason that's come about is because there are some wonderful games that are available. And not just some, there are hundreds of wonderful games that are available and work really well with teaching different skills. So anyway, we will move on to talk about a typical day. So one of the things that you want to think about when you're talking about your typical day is you want to think about the schedule. So you can think about a yearly schedule. In Pennsylvania, we need to do 180 days. So that might be something that you want to work on, kind of scheduling what you're going to do when in those 180 days. Then you can also think about a daily schedule. So for my older son, I actually did more of a weekly schedule, and I would schedule out what we were going to do or what was supposed to be accomplished for like the next 5 weeks at a time. And I would give him just a sheet of paper that had what was supposed to be done each week. And then he had the freedom to figure out how he was going to get that done. And like I said, he was very interested in time, so he liked being able to make those kinds of decisions himself. My younger son could not deal with a piece of paper that had 5 weeks on it. He needed to have each day scheduled out for him. So what I would do for him, I would actually print out a sheet that had the whole week on it, but it would say Monday, and it would list all of the things that we were going to do on Monday. And it would say Tuesday, and it would list all the things and all the activities that we had going on. So if we were going to go to gym class or something like that, that would be on there as well. And he would know exactly what needed to be done, and I'd put it in the order that it needed to be done. And sometimes he'd even have the time frame of when it needed to be done, so that he would have the ability to kind of check things off and make sure that he did all the things he needed to do every day. And with him, like I said, he was dyslexic, so there were things that were things he could do on his own, and there were some subjects where he needed me to work with him. Maybe I needed to read something to him. So I would have a little asterisk next to the things that he could do on his own. So if I happened to get a phone call or something happened to take me away from working with him, he would know, okay, I can skip and do these things that have the asterisks next to them because those are things I can do by myself. So different kids need different kinds of schedules. So think about what you want to do as far as scheduling and be flexible. Be flexible in that whenever you try for scheduling might not work. I probably tried 5 or 10 different ways of scheduling, and some of them seemed to work for a little while, but then we wanted to change things up and something else seemed better, so we'd make changes. So be flexible that way, and then also be flexible as far as like scrapping your schedule if something good comes along. So in Western Pennsylvania, not every day is a beautiful day, especially during what we would call the regular school year. If you have a beautiful day in February, then go do something fun outside. Go to the park. Just enjoy that beautiful day in a way that might be different than what you thought you were going to do that day. So don't be so tied to your schedule that you can't take advantage of good opportunities that come along. In the beginning of the school year, we would often scrap what we had on our schedule and go on a field trip because the weather was good and because a lot of times the school kids weren't on those field trips because they didn't do field trips within maybe the first few weeks of school or something like that. So even if we had kind of a schedule set up that we do this and this and this each day, we might say, you know what, today we're not going to do it. We're going to go to the Children's Museum, or we're going to go to the Science Center or someplace like that where we knew that it was just the really the best time to be able to do that. So so that's something else to think about. And then also be sensitive to your child's grade level. So if you have a first grader, maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours is what you want to spend on homeschooling, definitely with some breaks in there and probably a snack. But don't push them to do an entire full day like they would if they were in school, as some of us would kind of think that way, because you can accomplish a whole lot more at home than you can in school with a class of 25 children. So it's okay if you only spend a couple hours doing homeschool, and it's okay to take breaks too. So don't feel like you need to make sure that your child is doing school the whole time the other kids in the neighborhood are at public school. That's not necessary. And one of the approaches we talked about with Charlotte Mason, one of the things Charlotte Mason thought was really important was nature study and getting kids outside. And so she would encourage you to send your children outside in the afternoon and let them study nature and learn things on their own and enjoy the opportunity that they have to do that. Prepare a place. So you might want to come up with a place that you're going to do your homeschooling. So we started out doing our homeschooling in our dining room because that was the space that was available. And then we put an addition on our house when our oldest son was 8 years old, which freed up what was our family room. It was a small family room to become our homeschool room. So we called it the study because we thought that sounded more enticing than the homeschool room, but or inviting, I guess maybe is the word. And so we were able to have that room to have all of our materials. We had lots of bookshelves with books on them, and that room even has a bathroom in it, so it was great. It worked out really well. But you need to figure out what place you're going to use. Do you want to have a table? Do you want to have desks? How do you want to go about setting things up? You probably want to have materials that you need close by, easy to get a hold of. So paper, pencils, things like that. How are you going to do that? Are you going to have a box for each child that has like their books in it and pencils and notebooks and things like that? Or are you going to have a shelf? Or what are you going to do? So think about how to prepare that place. Try to find a place that is maybe away from some distractions that might be a problem when you're homeschooling. And then think about how you picture a day. What do you think your day should look like? Should you get up at 9 o'clock? Should you get up at 7 o'clock or earlier? What are you going to do first? Are you going to have a devotional time with your kids first? Are you going to jump right into math first? With our younger son, we found that he learned best in the morning. And so we tried to do the things that were hardest before lunch, because after lunch he was tired. And he could do things like go to gym class or maybe do some kind of art or music or whatever, but the things that were more challenging, it was best for him to do that first thing in the morning. And he's still like that. He'll get up early to work on a project as opposed to stay up late. Whereas my other son will stay up all night long to work on a project. So everybody's different. Think about those things when you're deciding what your day should look like. So this is just a list of a sheet that just has a list of the numbers 1 through 180 and blank spaces. And it's just something that I use to be able to break up what we were doing sometimes into different segments. And this is the final thought for this section of the video. Remember that you can't teach them every piece of information they will ever need to know, but you can teach them to love learning, to be curious, and how to find any piece of information that they want. So that's something that I have hanging by my desk at home, and it really was something that kind of inspired me as I went through the homeschooling journey. I knew I wasn't teaching them everything, but hopefully I was teaching them to learn. I was helping them to enjoy learning so that they would stay curious and that they would be able to find the information. And I really think that happened in our family, that our kids have gotten to the point where they can find information that they need and they still enjoy learning new things. So now I just want to share a few final thoughts. I'm going to read a few things just so I can say them in sort of a concise way. So you need to make sure that you remember to consider your child's interests, strengths, and weaknesses before determining which curriculum you're going to use. Think about those things, and that'll help you to make good decisions about a curriculum that's going to be a good fit for your family and your child in particular. And also, I wanted to say, because I didn't say this earlier, that when my children were young, I tended to use, like I'm saying, kindergarten age, preschool age, even some first grade. I tended to get workbooks from the dollar store. There were a lot of colorful workbooks that my kids enjoyed doing. They were fun, and they were, to me, as good as any kindergarten curriculum that I could find. And so instead of spending a lot of money on curriculum, I got books from the dollar store, and also we used books from the library, and that's all we did for our early years of homeschooling. Once they got a little bit older, first grade, second grade, we started to buy a little bit more curriculum. But in the early years, feel free to get those dollar store workbooks, or we could find them sometimes in the dollar section at Target or whatever. There's some good things that the kids will just enjoy doing. And remember that your curriculum is a tool, not a master. So you don't have to finish every book that you start, and it's okay. So don't feel guilty if you don't do everything that's in your curriculum, because again, it's a tool, not a master. And it's also a good idea to keep some work samples throughout the year of what your child has done, partially so you can remember what they've done, and in some states like Pennsylvania you need to have a portfolio at the end of the year, so it's easier if you actually keep some samples throughout the year. But even if you don't need that portfolio, sometimes it's really nice to have a memory book to be able to look back on the things that you've done. And also, it can help you to weed things out at the end of the year, because when you homeschool, you accumulate a lot of things, a lot of paper and artwork and things like that. And sometimes you can take a picture of some things and then you don't necessarily need to keep everything, because it will pile up over the years. And be sure to join a support group or a co-op. It really helps to have other people to encourage you as you continue to homeschool. And it's really hard to homeschool alone. So the last thing I want to do is to just list some homeschool resources. So these are a lot of resources that we used over the years, and just some things that I'm aware of that might be helpful to you, just to show you there are plenty of things out there that you can take advantage of as a homeschooler. So once again, there are co-ops, book clubs, gym classes, museum classes, library programs, nature centers, Gavel Club, which is a Toastmasters program, and in our case we had a Gavel Club for middle school and high school students so that they could learn about public speaking. Local college programs, church, social group. We had a social group with 2 other families, and we got together usually a couple times a month when the kids were younger, just so the kids had time to just socialize and play and didn't have anything else that was required of them, like at a co-op where they might have some academic requirements or need to be in a class and not really have the time to actually just socialize with other kids. And it also gave the parents time to socialize as well. Bible Bee, science fairs, 4-H, Harvey Cedar's Bible Conference, Homeschool Week at the Beach. We love that. We went for probably 10 years, Long Beach Island, New Jersey. YMCA swim and gym classes, Book It, that's the Pizza Hut reading program. Speech and debate clubs, Math Olympiad, robotics. We did Best Robotics. Homeschool project fairs, homeschool baseball, Geography Bee, Spelling Bee, Math Club, art lessons, Ambleside online curriculum, which is free, and also Easy Peasy online curriculum, which is free. The Virtual Homeschool Group, which is an online co-op that's also free, and they have at your own pace courses, which are pre-recorded, and you can do those anytime that you want to, so that's a great resource. Starfall, which is a reading site on the web that you can use for beginning reading. There's some fun games on there. Awana, Pioneer Clubs, Community Bible Study, which in our case they had a homeschool children's program that our kids participated in for years and years. Upward Sports, and also your local state convention. So pretty much every state has some kind of homeschool convention on a yearly basis. Here in Pennsylvania, it's the CHAP convention, and it's usually in May or June, depending on the year and the venue. So I encourage you to go to the convention. You can hear speakers, you can look at curriculum, and it's just an encouragement usually to mom and dad, if dad's able to go along too. And in our case, we took our kids with us as well, so they would have a chance to look at curriculum and help us make choices about the things that we would do the next year. So thank you again for taking time to listen.